It wasn't a proposal. That mattered to him. He wanted to be clear about that from the beginning, even though beginnings were something he'd never been particularly good at. Proposals came with certainty, with a confidence that said, I know exactly where this is going. This wasn't that. This was more like standing barefoot in the doorway, unsure whether the floor inside was warm or cold, but stepping in anyway because staying outside felt worse. They met the way many tired people meet now, accidentally, quietly, without sparks. No dramatic collision, no movie moment recognition, just two people sitting in the same coffee shop too often, learning each other's routines before learning each other's names. He noticed her first because she always chose the table near the window, even when it was cold. She noticed him because he never wore headphones, like he wasn't trying to disappear. The first time they spoke, it wasn't memorable. That was the point. Is this seat taken? She asked, holding her cup with both hands. No, he said, go ahead. That could have been it, and for a while it was. Weeks passed like that. Shared space without shared story, familiar without intimacy, until one night, late, quiet, the kind of evening that made people softer, she stayed when she usually left. You come here a lot, she said, not accusing, just observing. So do you, he replied. She smiled at that, small one, careful, like she wasn't sure it was. Aloud. I'm Mira, she said. Ethan. They didn't shake hands. That felt too formal for two people who had already memorized each other's presence. Their conversations didn't follow the usual path. No rapid-fire questions about jobs, hometowns, future plans. Instead, they talked about small things, the kind that usually get skipped. I like the sound this place makes when it's almost empty, she said once. What sound? That hum, she said, like the building is breathing. He listened. She was right. Another night he admitted, I don't like being asked what I do. I always feel like I'm failing the question. She didn't rush to reassure him. She just nodded. Yeah, she said, me too. That was the first moment he felt it, the relief. Not excitement, not hope, relief, the quiet kind that settles in your chest when you realize you're not being evaluated. They didn't call what they were doing dating. They didn't even call it anything. They just kept choosing the same place, the same time, until it became obvious that it was no longer accidental. Ethan had dated before. He'd been good at it, actually. Good at showing up polished, good at being interesting, good at saying the right things at the right pace. But somewhere along the way, he'd learned a dangerous lesson, that being wanted was safer than being known, so he'd built versions of himself people could admire. Dependable Ethan, calm Ethan, successful Ethan, the one who never needed too much, the one who never asked for reassurance, the one who was always fine. And people loved that version of him. They just never stayed when the performance ended. Mira was different, not because she was extraordinary, but because she wasn't impressed. She listened without scanning for highlights. She didn't rush silences. When he paused, she waited. That alone felt radical. One night, after they'd been sitting together for hours without noticing the time, she said, Can I tell you something strange? Please, he said. I don't feel like I have to be interesting with you. He felt that land somewhere deep, somewhere tender. Me neither, he admitted. That was the night he almost ruined it. They were walking outside, the city quiet in that way it only gets after midnight. The air was cold enough to make honesty tempting. He felt the familiar urge rise, the one that said, Lock this down, define it, secure it before it disappears. So he said, What are we doing? She stopped walking. Not dramatically, just enough. I don't know, she said. Why? Because I'm scared, he thought. Because I've lost things before by not naming them. Because I don't trust calm. Because when something feels good, I wait for it to leave. But he didn't say that. I just wanted to know, he said instead. She looked at him carefully, like she was choosing her next step. I like this, she said, but I don't want to rush into a shape we haven't grown into yet. Old Ethan would have nodded and swallowed the discomfort. He would have said something smooth, something reassuring, something that hid the fear tightening his chest. Instead, he said, That makes me uncomfortable. She didn't flinch. Yeah, she said gently. Yeah, he said. Not because I disagree, just because uncertainty makes me want to perform. Her eyes softened. Thank you for telling me that, she said. No one had ever said that to him before. Not to honesty, that wasn't pretty. They kept walking. It wasn't a grand turning point. There was no dramatic kiss under a streetlight, just the sense that something fragile had been handled carefully and survived. Over time, pieces of themselves surfaced, not all at once, not in neat confessions, in fragments. He told her about the nights he stayed busy to avoid feeling lonely, about the way he learned to be useful instead of vulnerable, about the relationships that ended not in explosions, but in quiet misunderstandings he never corrected. She told him about how she learned to disappear inside relationships, how being low maintenance became her armor, how she mistook self-erasure for peace. Sometimes one of them would pull back, go quiet, not out of cruelty, but exhaustion. And instead of assuming, the other would ask, "Do you want space or do you want company?" That question changed everything. There were nights when Ethan felt himself closing, his chest tight, his words hiding, old instincts whispering, "Don't burden, don't ask, don't need." One night, he didn't answer a text for hours, not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know how to say, "I'm tired," in a way that won't make you leave. When he finally responded, it was short, polite, distant. She didn't chase him, she didn't accuse. The next day she said, "Hey, yesterday felt heavy. Do you want to tell me what was going on, or should we just sit together tonight?" Something in him cracked open. "I didn't know which version of myself to send you," he said. She didn't ask which versions those were. She didn't need to. "Send the tired one," she said. "I already like him." That was the moment he realized this wasn't about romance in the traditional sense. It wasn't about intensity or chemistry or fireworks. It was about permission. Permission to arrive as he was. Still, fear didn't disappear just because it was understood. There were days when Mira pulled away too. Days when her voice flattened, when she answered but didn't offer. Ethan noticed because he paid attention now. But paying attention didn't mean knowing what to do. One evening, sitting across from her in the same coffee shop where everything had started, he said, "You've been quieter lately." She nodded. "Yeah. Do you want me to ask questions or just be here?" She exhaled, long and slow. "Just be here." So he was. No fixing, no advice, just presence. Later she said, "Thank you for not making me explain before I was ready." That sentence stayed with him. Weeks turned into months, not because they planned it that way, but because neither of them ran. They didn't avoid hard conversations, but they also didn't manufacture drama to feel alive. They learned that consistency could be intimate. One night, lying side by side, not touching, just sharing space, Ethan said, "I'm afraid sometimes." "Of what?" she asked. "Of failing at this," he said. "Of hurting you. Of realizing too late that I didn't know how to love right." She turned toward him. "I'm afraid too," she said. "But I don't think fear means stop. I think it means slow down." He nodded. This was the love he hadn't known how to ask for before. Not the kind that demanded confidence, but the kind that made room for doubt. Months later, someone asked them, "So when did you know?" They looked at each other. "I don't think we knew," Mira said. "I think we noticed." "Noticed what?" the person asked. "That we kept choosing honesty," Ethan said, "even when it was uncomfortable." That night, after they were alone again, Ethan said, "I want to tell you something." She waited. "This still isn't a proposal," he said. She smiled. "Okay, but it is a question," he said. "Will you keep doing this with me?" "Not forever, not perfectly, just honestly." She reached for his hand. "Yes," she said, "as long as we keep asking, instead of assuming." He squeezed her hand, feeling the quiet truth of it settle in. Love, he realized, didn't need to be impressive. It needed to be real. And real was something he could finally show up for. They stayed, not because it was easy, but because it was honest. And that, for the first time, felt like in.